Now we're going to talk about conversions of percents with decimals as well as fractions. As we discussed in the last video, a percent is a fraction out of 100. So anytime you're given a percentage, you can write that as the percent value over 100. This means that 100% is equivalent to the fraction 100 over 100, which simplifies to 1. So in other words, this means that 100% refers to the entire amount. In a similar fashion, 50% is equivalent to 50 over 100, which simplifies to the fraction 1/2. This means that 50% refers to half of the given amount. So when we're doing calculations involving percentages, the percent must be converted to either a decimal or a fraction before actually doing the calculation. So because of this, it's super important that we familiarize ourselves with conversions of percents as they pertain to decimals and fractions. We'll start off by talking about how we convert percents to decimals. So the first step here is to remove the percent sign, and the next step is to divide by 100. And the trick to dividing by 100 is to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So let's look at a couple examples. So this first example here, we have 23.4%. So if we want to divide by 100, we need to move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So the decimal point is going to end up right before the 2. Since there's no digit before the 2, what we do is we add a 0. So this means that 23.4% is equal to the decimal 0.234. Let's take a look at another example. So example 2, we're going to do the same thing. We need to move the decimal 2 places to the left. And notice that there was no digit in front of the 1. So again, just like we did previously, anytime there's no digit there, we can just fill in a 0. So our decimal ends up being in between those two zeros. So we get that 1.67% is equal to 0.0167. So that is how we convert percents to decimals. Now we're going to talk about how we go backwards and we can convert a decimal to a percent. So since we're doing the opposite, well, the opposite of dividing by 100 is multiplying by 100. So that's our first step here. If we're going from a decimal to a percent, we need to multiply by 100. And the trick to that is to just move the decimal 2 places to the right. So essentially, we're just doing the opposite of what we did in the previous conversion. And then once we've done that, since we now have a percent, we need to add the percentage sign to our new number, right? So looking at example 1 here, we need to move the decimal 2 places to the right. So our new decimal is right between the 8 and the 6. This means that 0.7864 is equivalent to 78.64%. So basic steps here is move the decimal 2 places to the right and then add the percent sign. We'll look at one more example of this. If we have the decimal 0.3, we're going to move the decimal 2 places to the left. Again, notice there is not a digit after the 3. So what does that mean? Well, just like we did before, we're going to add a 0. And our new decimal goes right after that 0. This means that the decimal 0.3 is equivalent to 30%. All right, now we're going to talk about conversions with fractions. So first, we're going to talk about how we convert a percent to a fraction. So we already discussed how we can write a percent as a fraction out of 100 by just putting the percent number over 100. Once we've done that, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the fraction is fully simplified. Let's look at a couple examples. So example 1, we have 33%. We know that we can write that as the fraction 33 over 100. The next thing we want to do is we want to see if there is a common divisor between 33 and 100? In this case, there is not. There is no integer value that both 33 and 100 are divisible by. So that means that 33 out of 100 is as fully simplified as that fraction gets. Let's look at one more example. So if we have 24%, we can write that as the fraction 24 over 100. Again, we're looking for a greatest common factor between 24 and 100. In this case, we actually do have a common factor, and the greatest common factor between 24 and 100 is going to be 4. So 24 divided by 4 is equal to 6, and 100 divided by 4 is equal to 25. So this means that 24% is equivalent to the fraction 6/25. All right, the last type of conversion that we're going to talk about is how we convert a fraction to a percent. So going backwards from what we just talked about. There's actually two approaches for this. The first method, we use this when the denominator is a factor of 100. The idea here is we're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by the value that will make the denominator 100. Once we've done this, we know that the numerator of the resulting fraction is going to be the percent value that's equivalent to the fraction. Let's look at a couple examples here. So with example 1, we want to start by looking at our denominator. So we have 20 in the denominator, and we want to think about, is there a value that we can multiply 20 by to get 100? And that value in this case is going to be 5. So what we want to do is we want to multiply both the numerator and denominator by 5. And so that's going to give us 35 over 100. Because by definition, a percent is a fraction out of 100, well, since we have 100 in the denominator, that means that our numerator must be our percent value. So we can say that the fraction 35 over 100 is equal to 35%. Let's take a look at one more example. So example 2 here, we have the fraction 12 over 25. Again, we want to start by looking at the denominator and thinking about what value we can multiply it by to get 100. So what do we multiply 25 by to get 100? Well, that will be 4. So that means we want to multiply the numerator and denominator both by 4. And that gives us the fraction 48 over 100, which is going to equal 48%. So that's the first method, and again, this method only works if the number in the denominator is a factor of 100, meaning that there's some value you can multiply it by to get 100. This is not always going to be the case, and so that brings us to our second method. So this is the method that we have to use when the denominator is not a factor of 100. So here what we need to do is we need to use long division to convert the fraction to a decimal. And once we've done that, we can convert the decimal to a percent. And again, the trick for that is to move the decimal 2 places to the right. Let's look at an example of this. So this first example, we're given the fraction 7/8. If you look at the value in the denominator, 8, there is no integer value that you could multiply to 8 in order to get 100. So that's why we need to use the long division method. So anytime you have a fraction, you can turn that into division by taking the numerator and then dividing it by the denominator. So 7 divided by 8. And what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to add some zeros after the 7. Right? So we're going to add a decimal to the 7 and then add some zeros because we know that 8 is not going to go into 7 exactly. So 8 goes into 7 0 times, right? And then 8 goes into 70 8 times. 8 times 8 is 64. Subtract, we get 6. Bring down that next 0. 8 goes into 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. Subtract, we get 4. Bring down that next 0. 8 goes into 45 times. 5 times 8 is 40. So now that we have no remainder, we know that we have our final answer. So 7/8 we can say is equivalent to the decimal 0.875. And then using the trick that we talked about earlier to convert that to a percent, we move the decimal 2 places to the right, and that gives us 87.5%. Let's look at one more example. So example 2, we're given the fraction 5/16. So we know that that is equal to 5 divided by 16. Again, we're going to add a decimal, add a few zeros. We may need more than 3 zeros, but I just like to start off with a few, and then if we need to add more later, we can. So 16 goes into 5 0 times. 16 goes into 50 3 times. 3 times 16 is 48. Subtract, you get 2. Bring down the next 0. 16 goes into 20 one time. 1 times 16 is 16. Subtract, you get 4. Bring down the next 0. 16 goes into 40. It'll be 2 times. 2 times 16 is 32. Subtract, get 8. So we do need to add another 0. Bring it down. 16 goes into 80. It'll be 5 times, and if you didn't know that, it's okay to do some scratch work off to the side. So 5 times 16, 5 times 6 is 30. 1 times 5 is 5, add the 3, you get exactly 80. So when we subtract, we have a remainder of 0, which means that we've arrived at our final decimal answer. So 0.3125 is the decimal that's equivalent to 5/16. And then again, to convert that to a percent, we move the decimal 2 places to the right, and that'll become 31.25%. So this means that 5/16 is equivalent to 31.25%.